Download the AllStar app. Make your picks for UFC fights, challenge your friends, level up and win prizes. Link in description. Get it now. Javier Mendez, the head coach of American Kickboxing Academy, who has coached, a long list of champions and Hall of Famers, and he continues to do so. He says that he ranks Khamzat Chimaev's grappling as A+. That's like the highest rank you could get, right? And compares him to Khabib Nurmagomedov and Islam Makhachev.
Mm-hmm.
Now, your breakdown of Khamzat Chimaev's grappling, because you've seen him fight a bunch of times,
right?
But also you've seen him train as well,
mm-hmm.
right? So what do you think of his style?
Yeah, so it's obviously quite aggressive. It's admittedly, like from what I've seen, a little bit less calculated. Like at least before he started working with this new wrestling coach, like the one that coached some of the greatest of all time, is strictly in freestyle wrestling. But that kind of, because those guys were like super, super calculated, but this one was like, it probably would have been a good supplement to how he normally is. He's obviously very aggressive, goes for that takedown within the first 15 seconds of every fight, more or less. And so far it's worked out for him, and no one's really been able to stop it so far. And so there's a lot of good stuff going on at that time, right? There are certain times I've noticed in training where sometimes he's aggressive almost to a fault, but he's also athletic enough to correct himself, and just maintain good position so he doesn't completely lose the position when he's over aggressive. I've only glanced over a couple times and have seen it. Definitely would agree with the A+ ranking. Even those guys make mistakes sometimes. But yeah, a lot of the only, what's it called? Like the only hole I see in the grappling game there really has to do with being over aggressive and almost forcing yourself to make a mistake sometimes, or overextending yourself a little bit, things of that nature. But again, he's got the physical attributes to kind of compensate for that. So yeah, like I wouldn't call it perfect by any stretch, but his record speaks for itself too, and he's done a really good job for himself in MMA.
What did you think of his win over Robert Whittaker?
Oh man, that choke was across the jaw, right? That broke Robert Whittaker's jaw. That was crazy. That shot, like that was a great example too, where like by most standards, he had the physical attributes to finish that shot, but purely from a technical standpoint, that was not actually a clean shot. Like he was very extended. Right, by the time he completed the shot, his head was quite down. You kind of see this like nosedive like trajectory, which isn't great unless you know how to fix the position from there. Which for Khamzat, it was, right. It wasn't like clean posture, get to the hips, lift the opponent's feet off the ground, and then cover the hips for control. So like. But obviously, whether a takedown looks good or it looks bad, if you get the other person down on the ground, it doesn't really matter that much. Like, a takedown's a takedown, and then what you do with it and the kind of damage you do afterwards is really what makes it shine, right? And he did a really good job of top control, was using some cross wrist and some hook stuff. So, like, put on a really sufficient amount of punching pressure on top too to make Robert Whittaker have to react. Like especially in MMA, it's really disadvantageous if you're on bottom and if you're just staying completely still. So like significantly more so than in jiu-jitsu, and to some extent in wrestling too, where like in jiu-jitsu you can hang out on bottom for minutes and not really suffer any kind of penalty, but in MMA that's, you're like 1 second away from being punched in the face, especially if you stay still. And so Khamzat took full advantage of that, and it looked really good. Sometimes it makes me wonder if he did not have the same physical attributes, would he get away with some of the techniques that he's using? That's one of my concerns. So like as fighters get older, they don't get away with that kind of stuff nearly as much as the athletic primes of their career. So far it is working, but you also have time to refine your technique, you know, as you get older, right? Like Michael Jordan definitely wasn't doing the same stuff towards the end of his career as he was like in his athletic prime. And so like if you're looking at career longevity, he probably made the right move, like switching coaching staff and really getting to like the really cerebral, really smart approach.
Do you feel like with Khabib, right?
Mm-hmm.
I feel Khabib was probably the best MMA wrestler out of the three. You know, even
right.
when you look at Chimaev, right?
Yeah.
And you mentioned that Chimaev gets away with certain things in MMA that probably he wouldn't get away with in pure wrestling. Like
Right.
if he faced a pure wrestler, those deficiencies, right? You
Yep.
could kind of mask them in MMA
Yeah.
more. And do you feel like Chimaev's wrestling, MMA wrestling, could become better than Khabib, or will he rely on his other attributes more to the point where he will never kind of be the Khabib? Or because Javier Mendez is saying that they're kind of at the same level,
Right.
but just different.
Yeah.
And when you look at Khabib, like what made his style so masterful?
Right. Yeah, it's the top control, the like taking people to deep waters and really pressuring them, right? Like it's hard to say completely at the moment. I think mostly because we haven't really seen Khamzat go the distance too many times compared to Khabib, right? Or like we haven't seen him fight for that long compared to Khabib anyways. Like, so just based on what I've seen, Khabib seems to have better ground control. And then even like the few occasions that Khabib ended up on bottom for whatever reason, he had some really good tools to fix the situation very, very quickly. Khamzat has not been tested that way either, where it's like currently I keep seeing it as like mental warfare almost, where if Khamzat continues to, well, use his aura in that way and like just really assert his will onto his opponent, he's going to keep having that advantage. But if there's somebody who's, equally strong-willed and is like, and basically makes this statement in a way of, I'm not going to react to you, I'm going to do my stuff and you're going to have to react to me. It's like when he faces that kind of a fighter, that's probably going to be the true test to see how well he can stick to his own game. He's currently done it really, really well against some really highly ranked guys. So to be fair, like, obviously credit where it's due. He's obviously A+ level for sure. But at the moment, I think we've seen more of Khabib and more of Islam's all-around wrestling and grappling for MMA. So then we've got a better idea of what they're capable of. And there are certain positions and situations, I would say, that Khamzat's not been tested in yet because he's been so good at just asserting his will onto his opponent and basically making them react to the few bits and pieces that we've already seen him do to previous opponents.
Yeah, when you would rank like those three, right? Because those three are probably the Mount Rushmore.
Yep.
Of Eastern European
Yeah.
fighters, right?
Yeah,
Pretty
yeah,
much,
yeah,
right?
for
Like,
sure.
This kind of like recent generation. We're not gonna go back to like Fedor and
Yeah,
and
yeah,
those
of course.
times. But in this recent generation in the UFC, I feel like Khabib is probably the best MMA wrestler. But as an MMA fighter, Chimaev and Islam is better, are better. I see that, right?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Because there are some subtle differences, right? Like even Khabib and Islam, who were trained by the same person, you can kind of see that they make different technical decisions in certain moments. So I think, for example, you can kind of see it on the cage, where Khabib will be more comfortable going for a more wrestling approach and going for the hips, grabbing the legs, manipulating the hips that way, where Khamzat at times can take a more judo approach, where it's like clinch up, underhook, get chest to chest, and then use his legs to trip and sweep people, like he did to, like Charles Oliveira, for example, in that fight. And so the technical choices are different. As far as how they get to the ground, even that's a little bit different too, I guess, right? Because with Islam, he seems to be, he goes for submissions more than, from what I remember about Khabib, right? And Khabib would go for ground and pound more. And so, like, some of those decisions were a bit different. And even from the same coach, you can kind of see that little bit of nuance, right? And that's just because their personalities are not exactly the same either. And so that kind of shines in the way they fight, which is totally normal. So, I'd probably agree with that assessment, that, that there are some, I don't know, depends on subtle or distinct differences. That kind of depends on how you look at it. In some ways, that is a subtle difference. And in other ways, it's like, oh, okay, they are using some really different things, or they're approaching it a little bit differently. But yeah, whatever they've chosen to do, all three of them have shown they're super, super proficient at what they've, decided to, the tools that they've decided to refine over the years.
Yeah, man, I'm super excited to see what Khamzat can do, man, because we're kind of just at the beginning stages of his championship run. You know what I mean? And who knows how long that will last? Right. Even if it will last very long, you know what I mean? Because the division is, I don't know, it's almost like the division is right for him to take over.
Yeah.
The only style I think that will give him trouble is Dricus, and Dricus is a champion. So
right.
What do you see in that fight, Khamzat versus Dricus? Because Dricus takes the textbook and throws it out the window, burns it, everything, and then just somehow he wins fights.
Yeah, there's some weirdness with how he fights, right? It's like you could kind of see that with Tony Ferguson to some degree, where it's like that, but I think because with Tony, you had the personality that just mirrored the weirdness. And with Dricus, he doesn't seem to be as far on the weird as Tony is. But yeah, those kinds of people, how do you game plan for that, right? That's just ridiculous. It's like they're doing stuff fundamentally wrong in some cases, and it's working for them. So it's like, what the hell's going on here? I can't game plan for this. I can't develop a feel for this, right? So it's almost like there are certain aspects of those fights where it's like, well, I've got no choice but to fly blind, and then I just have to figure out how to make those adjustments, within the couple seconds or minutes that I have in the cage. So to have that kind of unique style, highly, highly advantageous. The downside to trying to cultivate a style like that is, you've got to move away from the blueprint a little bit and just kind of figure out what works specifically for you. Because if someone else, if someone else completely new started MMA and was like, I want to fight like Tony Ferguson, or I want to fight like Dricus, you'd be like, I highly do not recommend that. But it does work for them. But, it's kind of the advantage of being the exception to the rule, almost. It's like you get this sort of first fight advantage, almost, where I'm curious to see how they do against opponents in rematches. Because if you've kind of faced against it once, you'll have a better feel for it. But it still would be very difficult to game plan for. You can't really get training partners to emulate that kind of stuff either. So it's very tricky.
Yeah, it's and it's not the thing about Dricus is that he's probably stronger than shit. He's built like a tank, stronger than shit.
Yeah.
Has a gas tank, which is very helpful with the style that he has.
Right.
Knows how to kind of regulate his gas tank as well. It seems like sometimes you'll see him kind of like slow down in
Yeah.
rounds, and people think that he's tired, but really he's not, because he'll come out the next round
Yeah.
and go berserker, right?
Right. Even when his body language, like when his arms kind of flail a little bit, it was like, it's almost like when you see that, you kind of think like, oh, they're losing control of their muscles. They must be getting tired. But for Dricus, he still seems capable of generating enough force to hurt his opponent in those moments. So, like, there must be something going on with the way he's fighting or the way he's carrying himself, the energy management that the rest of the field has not figured out yet, just because he's a weird fighter.
Yeah, with that, it seems like once someone figures it out, or that type of fighter gets an injury or something, it's almost like a cliff that they fall off of, right?
Right. It's a pretty steep drop. They don't have
all cylinders moving at the proper, moments, and now you lose like a wheel.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, some fighters can lose a wheel and continue on and be elite, right? But we'll see with Dricus, man. Dricus has impressed everybody. He hasn't lost once in the UFC.
Right.
And has taken out all of everybody, right? That has come in this path, dude. And it's crazy that he's done that. When this is the way I look at it, when I look at like Khabib, Islam, and Khamzat, right? I feel like Khabib, like he set the bar, right? And then he retired, early.
Yeah.
Most people don't retire that young, right? Especially as the champion. So he retired early. He set the
Definitely.
bar.
Yeah.
Islam comes in, exceeds whatever Khabib did, and is all around a better fighter than Khabib. Like, I think we could say that right now.
Yeah.
Like, the level of competition Islam has beaten.
For sure.
Yeah, it probably exceeds what Khabib has beaten, right?
Yeah.
And then now you got Khamzat. I feel like Khamzat's going to exceed what Islam is going to accomplish.
Right.
And it's happening at the same time, which is wild, right?
Yeah.
I just can't wait to see certain fights, you know what I mean? Like Khamzat versus Dricus.
Yeah.
Like even like Khamzat versus Izzy, if that fight ever happens. Like, there's a lot of fights where Khamzat can build his name off of, and they're very advantageous fights for him, especially his style, right?
Yeah, for sure.
The only question mark are his health issues past him? And another question is there any lingering effects or side effects from these health issues that can come up later on and affect performance in a 5-round title fight against a Dricus du Plessis, who seems like he has no issues of anything, right?
Yeah, no issues going 5 rounds.
Into like the Hulk.
Yeah.
When he goes into a fight, and it just goes crazy, right?
Right,
so,
absolutely.
And he could take shots too, right?
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very interesting, but I'm very high on Khamzat. If he stays healthy, I feel like he becomes a legend of the game.
Yeah, I think the important thing for his like longevity in his career is how healthy he manages to stay. So some of these decisions might take place off of the mat. It might have to do with training volume, which I think was kind of addressed somewhat with the new coaching staff that he had too, where it's like, look, you don't have to go balls to the wall every session, right? Like, you can do that as a teenager, and like your body won't have any consequences to that. But beyond that, you've got to play it smart going into your 20s and like definitely going into your 30s if you want to have a long career.